Dude, that line where he says like people when they're on an edge, it's not the fear of falling, it's the fear of jumping. I was like, yeah, that actually like my fear of heights is because I'm like, I could just jump right now. Like nothing's stopping me. I could do this. I'm not like I don't have those kind of thoughts, but like
It's
when
the
I'm on the edge, I'm
intrusive.
like, I
It's
gotta
the
get
intrusive thoughts.
I have a lots of intrusive thoughts.
I finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched.
I
finally
Watched.
I
finally
Watched.
I finally
Watched.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and I finally watched Margin Call.
And joining us for his fourth episode is Garrett.
I
Who
like how
basic-
Garrett's like Cher. He doesn't need a last name. Just people in the pod know him.
I'm just Garrett.
Just Garrett.
He's normally the Denis guy, but today's the JC Shandor. Shandor? How do you
Shandor?
pronounce it, Garrett?
Chandor?
I don't know. Shandor, yeah. So I was like thinking about this today. So this came out in 2011. I think I just like saw the DVD in Walmart in like the $5 bin and bought it in like 2012. Like when I was looking for a job or taking the bar or whatever. I can't remember. And I watched it, I think probably because it had Paul Bettany in it and then a bunch of other people. And I was just like, wow, that was really good. And it felt like it was one of those things where it's just like a movie that no one knew about that I discovered. And then I was looking today and it was like nominated for an Oscar for screenplay. And so I guess it wasn't necessarily that. It was like a $3 million budget movie, but this felt, I mean, it is basically an indie with like just a bunch of famous people in it. Although I don't know who financed it. My point being is I felt like this was a discovery for me. And then I just realized, no, that like a lot of people knew about this. Was just me, like, I guess being in law school and missing it. Although during law school, I went and saw a lot of fucking movies and didn't do a lot of studying. So I don't know.
I mean, I didn't know about this either until you brought it up. And yeah, it's such a funny little movie because like you said, it's like a TV bottle episode. Like everything takes place in one location, minus the few times they go outside of the building. But then that felt like really like kind of run and shoot. Like we got to shoot in front of this like house, and then we got to shoot in this bar. And it's like even when Penn Badgley and Zachary Quinto are in the, or is it Paul Bettany in the strip club? No, it's Zachary Quinto in the strip club.
Yeah.
They both are.
Yeah, that felt really like, hey, we're just going to show the women's legs. There's a couple like through. One thing I got to say real quick, cinematography in this was really cool, especially with like the limited space they had. But yeah, the strip club was like, yeah, we're going to show. It could have been in the back of a broom closet made up to look like a strip club, the way it was like that one angle we were given for it. But yeah, it felt like a real point and shoot sort of like go sort of movie. And that probably maybe had a little to do with how fast everyone talked in this movie.
It was produced by Zachary Quinto. Like
Oh.
his production company produced it. But I think Alon hit the nail on the head. I told myself before doing this, I was like, oh, I can watch this in like an hour and a half. It's like probably an 80-minute movie. And it's almost 2 hours. Like it just flies by so fast because it's just scene to scene to scene to scene and is essentially almost happening in real time, right? Like the whole entire movie takes place in like 24 hours, maybe.
Yeah, about that.
So they get off work at like, I don't know what the time those guys usually get off work, like 5, 6. And then they find, I know like Kevin Spacey says something about like, oh, it's 2:30 in the morning. And then Jeremy Irons is like, oh, we got to get out of here by 6. And then at the end, they're like 93% of our sales has to be done by 10, 11 a.m. So that's definitely 16 hours right there. So I don't know what time they get off work, I guess, or what time, not Mark Strong. Stanley Tucci. Stanley Tucci gets fired. So yeah, it's a real like self-contained film.
Mark Strong's actually a good contender for a question I had, which was like, does anyone look better with male pattern baldness than Stanley Tucci? Like, especially
Mark
like in
Strong.
this, I think honestly, I think Stanley Tucci does it a little bit better to where like I think he doesn't look as good with hair, and I don't think he'd look as good if he did like the full shave. Like, I think he pulls off that look like pretty perfectly.
I think the only one. I think you're right. Mark Strong's like a total bald guy,
Well,
right?
what
Like
about
he's
Vin Diesel? Like, are you isolating it to guys in suits?
no. I think he's isolating to guys who aren't like 100% bald. Like a little like
Yeah, Vin Diesel shaves. I'm talking about guys who are rocking the horseshoe.
Oh, you want the Dr. Phil look?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think Stanley Tucci beats Dr. Phil
no 100%. Especially here. Have you seen
with
his
that
Gap?
tailored suit and
Have you
like the
seen
way the beard.
Have you seen his Gap ad? Here, I'll put it up on the screen. Look at that.
Oh yeah, he's got the hair a little bit
That's
there.
that's the two. Yeah, but it's going away pretty fast, and that's the Tooch Man.
I really,
Also,
if we fast forward a few years, I think Paul Bettany can take him.
I don't know. Paul Bettany's like a little pastier, whereas Stanley's got a little bit of a tan that goes here.
I think the only other person at like maybe early 2000s was Bruce Willis that could pull it off pretty well.
I guess. So this was the first movie by J.C. Shandor, and since then he has done All Is Lost, A Most Violent Year, which is a movie we're going to do eventually, Alon, that is great, and then Triple Frontier. So far this dude does not miss. Like, these are all great. He is doing Craven the Hunter, which is like, all right, well, maybe things will go downhill
I
there.
always feel like whenever I hear a new villain, Marvel villain coming out of Sony, it's not the director's fault. It has to be Sony. Like you cannot miss that many times without it being the studio.
I mean, Venom was good, so
Venom was great.
there's
So was Venom 2. Let There Be Carnage.
I haven't seen it, but I just liked.
The
I liked.
thing, the thing
I liked.
though,
Well, so the thing I loved about Venom, especially because we all lived in Atlanta when that came out, is seeing Venom have. There's this chase scene in Venom, and they just kept going down the same street in Atlanta over and over and over in that chase,
making
like
it feel like they went like 7 blocks,
like
but
seven times they went down that same street from
Yeah.
different angles.
I mean, I think arguably you could point out a lot of faults in Venom and Venom 2, but I think they're like really fun, fast-paced movies. And I think I was going to make it comparable to Margin Call, and I can't. So we're moving on.
I was thinking, so obviously, like the movie that's like kind of a piece with this is The Big Short. I like, but the feel of this movie is kind of a little bit closer to like Michael Clayton.
For me, it was I kept comparing it to 25th Hour.
I mean, that's good too because it's a New York movie, but like you're in boardrooms, it's late at night. Like obviously, Michael Clayton's a lawyer movie, but just like the scene with Sidney Pollack at when he's like talking to the reporter and he basically tells her to fuck off. Like I don't know, it had that feel to it, but that one's definitely more of a thriller. I was just looking, by the way, and J.C. Shandor is apparently in pre-production on a TV series for The Conversation, a remake of the Francis Ford Coppola movie, which that seems like a bad idea. I don't know how that could go well.
I don't know how it could go wrong.
A remake of like a classic, like as a TV series.
Well, we saw how Roadhouse went, so no argument.
That's true. Yeah, actually, Roadhouse might.
Roadhouse was excellent. Both
Roadhouse walked so that The Conversation can run. Yeah.
There we go.
So this movie was shot in 17 days. One of the funny things I read is that to get Jeremy Irons over here, his visa expired. So they had to like talk to senators and like really like work something out to get him over here to film. And instead of like having a week, they had like 3 days to do all of his parts. And it's like you don't really notice that because he is like once he's brought in, he's sort of in like every other scene. And I think like your like bottleneck analogy for a TV show obviously makes sense too with how short of a shoot this is.
Yeah,
like
I mean, I didn't know that about it, but since you said that, everything I say is like makes complete sense.
He's also
once.
only in 3 locations, right? He's in the boardroom, the
Yep,
bathroom,
the bathroom.
and the dining room.
Is he in a car? Isn't he in a car at one point?
No, because he takes a helicopter in, and we don't see
Yeah.
that. We just hear the sound.
Yeah, billionaires don't take a car into their office in
Like,
Manhattan. They
when
fucking
Zachary
fly.
Quinto, I'm jumping way ahead, but at the end when he like looks up at the sky and you hear the helicopters, he's like, "They're all arriving now." It's like,
But see, that's the kind of shot that makes this feel like a real indie movie. It's like you don't see the helicopter, unless you want to count the B footage, right? But you don't see any of our actors coming out of the helicopter, and then for the helicopter going over the head, it's like obviously a spotlight being like hoisted through the rooftop. That's clearly in a studio, like that's a set. So
Well, I think it's a building, but the helicopter wasn't real. They had to add it afterwards.
with the sound and the spotlight, right?
Well, and I think they show a helicopter, don't they?
Yeah, but it's like separate. It's like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
easy
yeah.
B-roll shot, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, in that sort of sense, it was like, oh, okay. You think that was a real rooftop?
I think what I
Yeah.
read it was because I read
think
the
it was.
Okay.
I think a lot of this was shot in like offices. They found like an office in New York City to shoot this in.
They're like, hey, Paul Bettany, stand on that ledge. Don't fall.
Probably like Lehman Brothers. Dude, that line where he says like people when they're on an edge, it's not the fear of falling, it's the fear of jumping. I was like, yeah, that actually like my fear of heights is because I'm like, I could just jump right now. Like nothing's stopping me. I could do this. I'm not like I don't have those kind of thoughts, but like
It's
when
the
I'm on the edge, I'm
intrusive,
like, I
it's
gotta
the
get
intrusive thoughts.
I have lots of intrusive thoughts.
The thing is, though, how funny that line is. I don't know if it's like not comedy, haha, funny, but that's the line that sticks with me after the movie. Always.
My favorite part of that is him saying "fuck it" and jumps down. He's like, "Not today."
Not today. Yeah,
that's my favorite part.
Although I'm surprised there wasn't a suicide in this film, as far as like we know when like Goldman Sachs went under, right? There was like a lot of people offing themselves.
There may have been after the end of the movie, right? I mean, the movie, we don't really get to see the aftermath.
Well, and so you're right that this was Goldman, because a lot of people think it was Lehman Brothers, but in an interview he says it was Goldman.
Had to have been Goldman Sachs.
But Goldman survived, like they came back.
Yeah, because they fire sold, right?
But one of the things when I made the Big Short comparison earlier is one of the crazy like how like these movies aren't really, they're about the same thing but they're completely different. Is The Big Short is obviously a comedy that's dramatic. This is a pure drama with like some funny stuff here and there that's like, but like super dry. But the other thing is The Big Short goes out of its way to explain everything to you about the crisis, whereas there's like 2 minutes in the movie that even tells you what this is about. Like without the scene in the movie where he just mentions like mortgages,
yeah,
you don't even know that this is about the financial crisis, the '08 one.
I mean,
yeah,
I think just the timing and location is pretty clear that that's what it's about, but they don't go into the detail. And I guess, what did you think about that, right? And even the characters themselves. Like, remember Kevin Spacey looks and he goes, I can't fucking read these things. Like, just tell it to me in English. Like,
It reminded me of a lot of people we worked with.
I used that line today at work.
It was that there was another line in there that kind of went off of that. Was I think it was Jeremy Irons. He's like, I didn't get here because
of my smarts.
Smarts.
He's like, talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old or a very smart golden retriever.
But that's said throughout the movie by multiple people. Talk to me in plain English was said like 2 or 3 times. Jeremy Irons says, talk to me like I'm a toddler. It's like all these higher ups. The movie makes a distinct point to be like, they are not smarter or as smart as like the Zachary Quinto character. We don't even see Penn Badgley do anything, but we assume he's pretty smart to be where he is.
But the other thing about that is just that if you've worked in like, not even that world, right? If you've worked in any like white collar environment like that, the people that have been there longest, they don't adapt into the new technologies. So it's like they're very smart, but they don't know how to do the things that the younger people that come in know how to do, because they're come in to learn how to do certain things. And so they're like, they never did what those people are doing. So when they're looking at it, they're like, I don't fucking know what this is, because that's
Well, yeah,
not their
it's kind of
job.
like they're tripped into this position. They're like, okay, this is where I am now. You know,
Or
um,
they don't need the detail, right? Like I think it's in the boardroom scene. I know we're jumping all over the place, but Jeremy
doesn't matter
Irons
anymore.
makes a point to never open up that little notebook that they went to the printer. Like he touches it and like flips it with his finger, and then after Zachary Quinto talks for like a minute, he's like, "Now let me tell you what I think this report says, and give me some rope here." And then he nails it, and they're just like, "Yeah." He's like, "All right, the world's going to shit."
You know, it's a very subtle thing in this movie. So, by the way, Alon alluded to this. I watched this movie 4 times in the last week
So have I,
because
at least.
I just kept putting it on. It's so watchable. And what's really actually funny is I was taking notes and I was like, oh, I don't know. I can't remember exactly where the Demi Moore Stanley Tucci scene happens at the end. I was trying to put in something and I was like, I didn't put it in. So I went back to my friend Matthew the other day, was like, hey, tell us where we can watch these movies. I went back to Tubi like 20 minutes before we started, and Margin Call isn't on there anymore. And I don't know if it's just because they're like, you've watched this too much, like you don't get to watch it anymore.
No, I
Or if
had that issue today. It's on Freebie.
I know I had to go to Freebie, but I watched Margin Call on there at 2 p.m. on Tubi. Like it just left.
I watched it yesterday on Tubi and then tried to watch it this afternoon and had to go to Freebie.
That's so weird. I'll add to it. I watched it 2 days ago on Tubi.
By the way, I like Tubi's new trademark. I don't think is great, but their new like the Tubi. I like that, but the trademark, I like their old one. Give it so Tubi just
Giving branding, marketing advice. Good.
brand it. Yeah, they're branding. That's what I should have said.
No
I have to
free
say
ads.
one of my I have to say one of my favorite characters in this is the mentalist.
Oh, I hate that guy, Simon Baker.
Simon
Like he's
Baker,
good
yeah.
in this movie. Sorry to interrupt, but I fucking hate that guy. He's like very
really?
handsome. He's very good at everything. Like I feel the way I feel like Paul Bettany and I have a similar reaction to that character. Not to compare myself to Paul Bettany, but
Well, I'm trying to
I
understand.
wish I could be Paul Bettany.
Do you hate him as a person, as an actor, or just in this movie?
He hates him because he ain't him.
yeah, I think David hit the nail on the head. I mean, the only other thing I can think of him in is The Devil Wears Prada, and he
That's
is like
so funny. I've never seen The Devil Wears Prada, so when I don't think of him in The Mentalist, I think of him in Eyes Wide Shut.
Did you watch a different cut of Eyes Wide Shut than the
No.
rest of us?
No, hold on. Just keep going.
So I remember him from L.A. Confidential.
Oh, that's what it is. L.A. Confidential. It's not Eyes Wide Shut. But it was a party scene. I remember sex being involved.
Well, yeah, that happened. Yeah. So before we just start going through the plot, the other thing is, and because I've watched this movie so many times, when I first saw Simon Baker in this, I was like, why do you have this TV show actor in this? And then I've sort of watched this so many times now that, especially the last 4 times I watched this time, I was like, no, he's actually excellent in this. I do have one person that I thought was miscast. I don't know if any of you feel like someone was miscast or you think everyone's kind of perfect.
I think Demi Moore was miscast.
Yes. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It just kind of felt like she was reading lines most of the time. Like she wasn't doing a lot extra with the character. Every time I watched it, I was like, I don't know, maybe it's good. And I was like, I don't know. And she's not like a bad actress. I just it never worked for me in this.
I do want to say, Garrett, that Simon Baker would have been 30 years old in Eyes Wide Shut. So I wasn't crazy.
So he was 27, 28 in LA Confidential.
Yeah.
So originally, Carla Gugino, dude, I'm glad we cut that. But there was I forget what movie it was where I couldn't say her name. We had to record me saying, it was like Gugino like 17 times before I finally got it right. So I had to pause and make sure. She would have been like great in this role. And she had to back out Yeah. I mean, like, I don't want to shit on Demi Moore. It didn't work in this movie for me. She's like been great in other stuff. I thought she was great in Tom Cruise movie, A Few Good Men. Like, I thought she was great in that. It's just like this did not work for me.
It's
And
weird that you both thought of that though, because it's like, I at least okay. I thought her scene where Stanley Tucci's like, "You bitch, you cut off my phone." Like I thought she was like okay in that 1 second of her there. I think you guys are
she
talking
says
about when
nothing.
she's monologuing,
I
right?
think she starts strong and she ends strong. So she's fine in that scene, and then she's fine. Like maybe she just has decent like chemistry and working relationship with Stanley Tucci, because when they're talking about the packages, like at the end, and it's like really awkward, she's good at that. But in all of her interactions with Jeremy Irons and with Simon Baker, she just seems like she's not really there.
Yeah.
I do want to mention because I took note of this, and I thought this was interesting, is that when we're talking about the packages, when Stanley Tucci in the beginning of the movie initially gets fired, and they bring him into that room, which is like they bring him into a private room that's completely glassed, so it's like everyone can fucking see him get fired. I was like, what is the point of this? But when they hand him like the little packet, did that look like a bereavement packet to you? Like, here's your funeral arrangements.
Are you talking
I,
about the Stanley Tucci thing in the beginning?
yeah, in the beginning
Sailboat?
when he's
Yeah, it
this,
looked like it reminded. I mean, that's up in the air. That scene.
Yeah. That's
It's
like
exactly
corporate
what.
firing.
Yeah,
yeah,
but I mean, it literally looked like the up in the air firing.
I haven't seen Up in the Air. I don't know why you're.
Oh well, then
Oh.
we're fucking doing up in the air for like just to let you know. But also the woman, so not the main woman that does the firing, but the assistant is How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my god, it is, isn't it?
I actually
Dude, so
had
I
to
saw-
look her up.
I was like, I know from something. Then I recognized her from How I Met Your Mother. I mean, she should have been the mother. She actually was going to be the mother for a long time, but the fucking show did too well, so it kept going. So they just had to move on to someone else. But she's I like her. So it starts with the layoffs. Let's just get into the movie. Finally, we're like 25 minutes in. We should probably talk about the movie. Starts with the layoffs, and then Zachary Quinto has this lady come up to him, and he's like, I'm not Eric Dale. Like the dialogue. So this got nominated for writing, and the dialogue in this movie is so fucking strong throughout. There's one scene I didn't like at the end that I'll point out, but otherwise, like flawless to me, like the dialogue in this movie. And what's funny too is, so they bring Stanley Tucci in, they tell him he's fired, and he has this line of like, risk management isn't really the place I would think you would make cuts. And it then becomes apparent throughout the movie that there are only two risk management people here, a rocket scientist who's been here for 2.5 years and a guy below him. That's it in the entire risk management department.
No, and then Demi Moore is the chief risk management officer.
I mean, I guess.
And then you have Stanley Tucci. So there's 4 people in that.
I know, but she's not doing the work. Like, she's like a senior person.
I also think that is only with respect to that one floor and the type of products that floor is buying and selling.
Yeah, but it's also like the main part of their business.
Well, yeah.
And then at the end of this, is getting way ahead of ourselves. They fired Demi Moore and Seth, so now and then they're promoting Quinto. So they're like, fuck risk management. We don't need that at all.
Well, not anymore. It's too late. You know what I think would be fun is for Garrett and I at the end of this to figure out which scene you dislike in this movie. But
well, just guess now.
All right, Garrett.
You said it was towards the end, right?
Towards the end, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it when Seth cries in the bathroom?
No.
Is it when they go to try to get Stanley Tucci back?
That's one of the best scenes.
Yeah, the bridge scene's incredible.
So I'll just tell you, because it's not good podcasting, you guys twiddling your thumbs as you think. It's the scene where Zachary Quinto comes up to Kevin Spacey. Because hold on. Because it just felt a little bit too like we have to talk about the lesson of this, like, or we have to. It
Oh,
was
when
like,
he's outside smoking?
yeah, he was like, "Oh, so aren't you worried about what this is going to do? Have you thought about oh, what about your son? I know him." And he's like looking off to the distance like, "I haven't even thought about my son." I don't know, it just felt a little bit like a little bit too on the nose to me of like, "Hey, this is kind of the point of the movie."
All right, strong disagree.
I could tell from
I
all
think
your emotions.
I think it's an excellent scene because it cuts Kevin Spacey out at the knees, right? So Kevin Spacey has been, maybe other than Zachary Quinto, he's been the hero, right? He's the one who's like, can you imagine what this is going to do to people? This is terrible. Oh my gosh, this is so bad. My dog's dying. I have feelings. And like the whole time, he's the one who's supposed to be like the moralistic human. And then at the end, he's like, oh yeah, I didn't even think to tell my son, who probably works in this field, that like his life is over. Also, like, yeah, I guess he is a nice person. You could say worse things about a guy.
This is the second movie we've done where he is the hero of a movie. The other being LA Confidential, which we just talked about. And I guess in every time you talk about Kevin Spacey, you have to mention that he's done bad things, but we will probably talk about his great acting later on in the pod.
He does fantastic acting in this movie, but I think that scene is to cut him out as though like he's like everyone is flawed.
Every single person is. There isn't a good person in this. Even Stanley Tucci, even Zachary Quinto, the one who kind of figures this out. No one's good.
Timothy Singh, he might be a good guy.
I don't know if he was better. They were good. You were better. If he was good, he would have not been fired. So I just think that the movie does at the end of The Big Short, they have this like epilogue where they're like, oh, everyone went to jail, the system completely changed, and they're like, ha, just joking, nothing changed, and they like show it to you. The end of this movie is so much more subtle, besides that scene, to me, is so much more subtle in nothing's changed. And I think like I for a while like was like, oh, this is a great movie, The Big Short's better. Having watched this movie 4 times in the last week, I think this is better. Now I'll watch The Big Short in the next couple of weeks and be like, The Big Short's better. But this movie is just like, it's just kind of written perfectly. I read that he wrote this in 4 days. And obviously it probably had some rewrites and some touch-ups. But 4 days to write what is kind of like a perfect movie is, just kind of incredible. So he gets fired. He sees Demi Moore outside. First, Paul Bettany comes in. He's like, who was it? Was it Jared? And he's like, I'm not going to say. And he's like, was it Robertson? And then he like looks at him. He's like, I will say. He's like, that cunt. And so he tells the people that actually do the firing, like, hey, I'm in the middle of a lot of stuff. And they're like, hey, the firm has made their plans. You're not involved anymore. And then he sort of says the same thing to Paul Bettany. And Paul Bettany's like, hey, appreciate your concern, but this is not your problem anymore. So, you just need to leave. And it's kind of funny that the dude who is getting fired is the only one that seems to care. And one thing I realized on watching this so much,
he's the only one who knows.
No, that's actually what I was about to say. And the movie's very subtle on this to where I didn't pick this up before. They knew for a year this shit was bad. Kevin Spacey knew.
Oh, yeah.
Demi Moore knew. Now that maybe they didn't know it was to this level, but they knew like, hey, this isn't as sound as we thought it was. And Kevin Spacey said we should have been doing something about this for a year instead of now, starting the collapse of Western civilization. We should have been fixing this over time.
And I do find this part interesting. Real quick, Gary, but so when he's leaving, he's kind of met by Quinto and Badgley, like their goodbyes, right? What's so weird is that Zachary Quinto's character has a moment where he's like, all right, I'm gonna say something nice to the guy, presumably the guy who hired him in the first place, 2 years ago, right? And so he follows him to the elevator and does this, and that's when Stanley Tucci hands him the hard drive. What was Stanley Tucci's plan with the hard drive if Zachary Quinto never went to him? He's gonna pocket it. He's gonna keep like company information on him, or is he going to give it to someone else? Or
Also, what about the security guard who's supposed to be stopping him from doing the very thing he did?
yeah, the worst security guard ever.
That guy's like, I don't make enough to fucking actually deal with this. I'll just stand outside. Yeah, I don't know. He was not doing a great job to just have. He's like just pulled a zip drive with every asset this company has on it, like the dollar amount and all of it. Like,
I think
just
he was
very
probably going to go
hilarious.
make a bunch of money, right?
Maybe
He just
I
bought a
don't know.
house.
Build another bridge.
But no, but what I like is that he mentions the problem to everyone he hasn't already mentioned it to. So he mentions it to the two women who are firing him, and essentially the security guard because he can hear it. And he tells Paul Bettany, who clearly didn't know ahead of time, but he doesn't say anything to Demi Moore when he's interacting with her down there. Like he could have said, "Hey, that thing we talked about last year, it's all about to blow up in our faces." But instead, he just chews her out.
Well, because he's already told her and she did nothing, in his mind. Yeah, it's just funny that so Demi Moore, the hierarchy is a little off, but so like Eric Dale, Stanley Tucci is the boss of Zachary Quinto. His boss is Will Emerson, Paul Bettany. His boss is Kevin Spacey. But then Demi Moore can also has the juice to fire Eric Dale. I guess they're all under her, but like it also doesn't feel like Kevin Spacey necessarily answers to her.
He doesn't because he's a different department. So it's like
Yeah.
his boss is Cohen, is Simon Baker. Simon
But-
Baker
but-
is higher
No, I
than
know-
Demi Moore.
I know, but Will Emerson, Paul Bettany answers to Kevin Spacey directly.
Yeah.
But then somehow Stanley Tucci was under Paul Bettany.
Yeah.
But Paul- but-
Stanley
but
Tucci was under Paul Bettany, but he was also under Demi Moore because they only have four
That's a
people
solid
in
run.
risk
That's
management.
a solid run organization when you have two people, like two bosses, and one of them can fire you, and the other one doesn't even know it's going to happen. And it's also like clearly Demi Moore went rogue in firing him, but then played innocent. But like because no one else was like, "Where's Eric Dale?" Like, "Oh, he was fired today." And you're like, the way Simon Baker plays that too is like, "Where's Eric Dale?" He's like, "He was let go of today." He's like, "Huh, interesting."
What's even funnier too is every time he's mentioned of being fired today, everyone seems surprised. But then when the phone, it's like, oh, we turned off his phone. Everyone's just like, why do we have that policy again? Like that's
Why don't we
just
fucking do that?
why do we do that?
Well, it makes sense, but it also, in this situation, fucks you. So the next scene is we see Kevin Spacey and he gives his pep talk. He has two of these, and they're both excellent.
They're so good.
His hand movements. So, like, when I first watched this movie, like the first few times, I was like, Kevin Spacey should be the Jeremy Irons character in this. Like, he could easily do that role. Kevin Spacey could honestly do any role in this movie. Except like the younger two guys, obviously, because that just doesn't make sense.
I would love to see Kevin Spacey as Seth.
I could I could see Kevin Spacey kind of being the Simon Baker role, but there's something about when Jeremy Irons fucking walks into a scene, you know without questioning that he's the most powerful guy in the room.
It's that voice.
It's just something. It's something about Jeremy Irons that you could have fucking Tom Cruise in there, and then Jeremy Irons walks in. It's like the same thing with like Tom Cruise and Gene Hackman in The Firm. It's like when Gene Hackman walks in, you know that he has it over Tom Cruise. So you know Jeremy Irons is the boss. There is something funny about how Simon Baker is younger than Kevin Spacey.
Well, I think
Kevin
that's
Spacey-
important, right?
Yeah.
Because he's a killer.
But I was just going to say, someone who could have done the Kevin Spacey role or the Jeremy Irons role and also has an excellent Dr. Phil is Ed Harris.
Yeah. Ed Harris, I think, more is the guy that is like, when Jeremy Irons is like, have Eric Dale here by 6 a.m., he's the guy that's like, it's done.
He's Carmelo.
Also, that guy's like, it's done, but it's like, I don't know, is it done? What are you
Is
gonna
it
do?
done? You've been
You
trying
gonna
to find him
fucking
for like
shrink-
9
you're gonna
hours.
Shrink dart him? What do you mean it's done?
he
done.
rolls up at the house at like 6 or whatever time they're there.
So one of my favorite lines from the first Spacey pep talk is, "They were good, you were better. don't think about them ever again. Just like they're dead. So after this, Zachary Quinto gets to work, figures everything out. He calls up Seth and he's like, Seth's like, you want me to get our boss's boss out of a club at 10 p.m. on a Thursday? And he's like, well, our boss got fired, so he is our boss. And I'm going to do a little quiz to Alon and Garrett to see which one of you knows the podcast better. So Paul Bettany, in another movie we've done on this podcast, insulted someone by calling them a girl. What was that movie?
A Knight's Tale?
Damn, I thought Garrett was going to win. It is A Knight's Tale. He calls Tudyk a girl and he's like threatens to punch him.
Yeah,
and this is like,
nice bag.
yeah, nice bag. Why don't you dance like a fucking girl for me?
He's like, do you have a dress to go with it?
You know what's funny is it because Garrett's a bigger fan of A Knight's Tale than me, or is it? Did you not think we did any other Paul Bettany movie than A Knight's Tale?
I'm probably a bigger fan of Paul Bettany.
I just felt like he pays attention to the podcast more than you, who's on it. So.
You know what's funny, Garrett? Would you say that you've listened to every episode of ours?
I have not. I've got a couple on the backlog right now.
Okay.
But I listen to many,
and
I frequently send David commentary.
No, he tells me that commentary. The feedback is.
I'm just waiting for someone to cite Wikipedia right
now. Yeah. No, it's funny because I was like, well, surely the way Garrett's telling it to David is not as mean as David is telling it to me right now. But I don't know.
Most of the time I just copy and paste, or I like screenshot it for you.
That's true. You do sometimes do that.
Oh, I don't screenshot the meaner ones.
No, but sometimes you're like, oh, so Gharrett listened to our episode on, fucking whatever. And I'm like, oh, and you like it? He goes, he didn't like you in it.
I don't say that. So back to the movie. One thing about this movie is there is no character development, really. It's just sort of character illumination. Like we learn about these people. No one changes over the course of this movie.
Actually, you could argue they get worse.
Well, I think Seth changes significantly.
No, I disagree. And
I don't
here's
think
why.
so. I don't.
But
think so.
I think the development or us learning about Seth's character is the most subtle. And having watched it so many times, like there's so many things in this movie about how Seth only cares about Seth and only cares about money. And one of the funniest things is, so when they come back to the office, Zachary Quinto's like, Eric gave me this. And Seth's like, Eric? And he's like, Eric Dale, our boss that was fired like 6 hours ago, you fucking asshole. Like, what do you mean, Eric who? And then they just sort of go through and they explain like, hey, the volatility patterns. And he's like, no,
go ahead.
He's like, when did when will we test these? And he's like, we already have, like Tuesday, last Friday, this Friday, next, 2 Fridays ago. And he's like, oh fuck. And I will say, the way like information is given to each person, it feels a little bit off to me. Like the way they explain it to him, he understands it right away. But to me, I'm like, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I'm not in that world. But he's like, I don't really understand any of this. And they're like, hey, we're testing our volatility patterns. And he's immediately like, fuck. But it's like, they didn't really explain that much. And then, so sort of next, he tells them, hey, go to this strip club to find Eric Dale. That's kind of your first hint that like even Stanley Tucci is not above board. He's going to strip clubs all the time. But when he calls Kevin Spacey to come back in, which I love, by the way, he's like, I need you to come back in right now. He's like, I'm not coming. It's like 11 o'clock. He's like, I need you to come back in. He's like, just tell me over the phone. He's like, I can't. He's like, well, just email it to me. He's like, I don't think that would be a good idea. And Kevin Spacey gets it. It's perfect. But when Kevin Spacey comes in, he's like, instead of just saying like, hey, we're fucking like these assets are gonna, what's essentially what he should be saying is the assets are not great. If they lose 25% of their value, we're fucked. But what he says is, Eric gave this zip drive. He said, be careful with it, which is like, he's saying be careful because it got him fired. And he's like, he said, be careful with it. And then he fixed it. He fixed what Eric couldn't do. And it's like, that information isn't telling you like what the crux is. You know what I mean? It's like,
we actually don't get that until at the end
boardroom.
The boardroom with Jeremy Irons,
well,
right? We don't.
I think that Paul Bettany doesn't completely understand what's happening either. right?
That's
Like
also true.
that's
He's
'cause
the only
he
person who
asks him.
doesn't talk in the boardroom too.
Well, and that's true. But when Kevin Spacey asks him, he's like, "Is this right?" He even says, "I don't know. Like, what do I know?" And I think that's a good line. One thing about that line is he says that line again at the end when they're like trying to dump all of the bad assets. And like, what's going on there? He's like, I don't know. They don't tell me anything. What do I know? And that happens throughout the movie. It's really obvious with Seth.
Yeah, but at that
So
point, it seemed like more of a lie.
when you're gonna lie, or when Paul Bettany's lying, right? But he's using a term or a phrase that he uses often, and I found that a lot of the characters in the movie say the same line over and over again throughout the movie, which I think is really natural. So like Seth is constantly mentioning money and using the same words to do so. The only adjective that Zachary Quinto knows for more is considerably. He uses that word like 5 times in the movie.
Isn't considerably an adverb?
You know, David, you can
I only
shut
know
the fuck up.
that's the only parts of speech I know is it ends in ly. But what I want to say is, so Paul Bettany is Kevin Spacey's guy in this, and Kevin Spacey has this line when Demi Moore and Simon Baker are going at it, and they're like, "No, we want you to stay," and he's like, "I don't want to stay. Well, how do you think I've stayed around here so long?" And so he's learned from Paul Bettany. He's learned from Kevin Spacey, like, stay out of the bullshit. Like, retreat, just do your job. Don't get involved in the politics. You know, that's what got Stanley Tucci fired. Stay away from that. So there's another line while he's showing Kevin Spacey this. Zachary Quinto and Seth, who is played by Penn Badgley. We just keep saying Seth, but Penn Badgley. They're in the car, and he's like, "Will just asked me if we found him yet. What do I say?" And he's like, "The truth. Just we haven't." Like, he's like, one is like, "Are you an idiot?" Two, like, why is your first like instinct like, should I lie?
You
And
know, it's so funny. We're talking about Penn Badgley's character so much. It has me thinking. So he's always curious about how much money everyone in the company is making at any given point, right? And he
Yeah.
either
And
knows
the strippers. He asks how much they make.
Yeah.
yes, because he's thinking about, you know, he needs a backup job after tonight. The thing is, though, is like, what's so funny is when he's in the car with Paul Bettany, and they're like, probably gonna fire me after this, right? He's like, more than likely, yes. He's like, are you okay? And he plays it off cool. He's like, yeah, I'm fine. It's fine. And then cut to him crying in the bathroom as Simon Baker comes in and fucking shaves, right? Because I guess that's important. He tells Simon Baker, "This is all I've ever wanted to do." And Simon Baker has the same reaction I do. Really? And you almost feel like it was genuine, but then you remember who Seth is as a character, and that's just a fucking lie. That's just he's trying to pull out the best sympathy card he could to keep his job.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Actually, I do want to talk more about the scene when we get back to it. So we are now in the point where Spacey tells them, "Hey, get those guys back here," and he calls in Simon Baker. So Simon Baker apparently is almost not playing like someone autistic, but just sort of a like maybe like you would, I guess, formally Asperger's. Like, basically, he's really good with numbers, but he's just completely non-social. Like, he met a guy when he was doing research, and he's like, "That's how I'm playing this character."
Who? Simon Baker?
Yeah, he's playing basically a antisocial, really good numbers guy, is what he said. Like,
See, I felt like that was Stanley Tucci's character, how he kept calculating every like the bridge passing and everything in his head. And
yeah, but he
Simon
was good with
Baker,
people.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
just
but
being smarter than everyone. Like, I think that was his thing.
when he was
Yeah.
like talking to Demi Moore about like how the packages are being divided up, and he like just randos like he says all those numbers. That's not him being like really good with them, because I felt like Simon Baker was more playing a sociopath.
I said antisocial. I don't know. It's along the same lines. Anyway, so we get in that scene, and he doesn't know that Eric's been fired, and he's just one thing about the way he plays the character too is he also just doesn't give away information. right? He asks questions, but he doesn't even in his responses. He's like, yeah, Eric's been fired. He's like, huh, interesting. He's like, what do you do here? Oh, you're a rocket scientist. Just, but like not giving away like his emotions or what he thinks about that. He just plays everything close to the vest because along with doing well for the company, he's just out for himself too. Like, and the way Demi Moore comes to him later and she's like, well, what are we going to do about this? And he's like, I don't know. I don't really think like that. It's like, he thinks exactly like that. Like that's his whole thing is like, how do I save me?
He even shuts up Ramesh. Like Ramesh starts to talk and he like puts his finger up, leaves to call Jeremy Irons, but doesn't tell anyone what he's doing.
Yeah.
Then comes back and just holds that close to the vest until later.
Until they hear like literally the helicopter landing on the roof, and they're like, "He's here." It's like, I called.
So that
him.
was apparently a cut scene where he called Jeremy Irons because Kevin Spacey says, "What are you going to do? Call him?" And he's like, "I already have," and that's what he was doing. And he also ad libbed the "What time is it? Fuck me, fuck me!" Like where he's just like, the fact that we're dealing with this like in the middle of the night. And what's interesting is so he then immediately he says to Sam, how long would it take to get this all off of our books? And Kevin Spacey Kevin Spacey is so good in this movie that there's so many times when another character is talking and the camera's just on his face reacting to it, and all of his reactions are kind of pitch perfect, like they would
For
be.
who?
Kevin Spacey.
Oh, yeah.
You skipped one of my favorite scenes though.
What's that?
When they get out, like they're taking the elevator up, and it opens. Seth and Zachary Quinto. It opens, and they just get in, and everyone's like a little terrified. And it's like, where are we going? We're going to get a second opinion on your work, Peter. And then when they're leaving, Paul Bettany's like, straighten your tie to Zachary Quinto, and he does. Seth doesn't even have a tie, but he's carrying a 40 in a paper bag, and then like tries to figure out what to do with it, and just like sets it up on a desk somewhere. It's like Seth did not belong in any of the scenes of this movie, but he was the necessary glue that like held everyone together. Because like
I like when Simon Baker at one point was like, Will, Peter, and what the fuck is his name? Seth, can you guys please leave?
That's what I'm talking about. Exactly. But they needed Seth because like if Peter hadn't called Seth at the beginning and had just had Will Emerson's number, Seth wouldn't be in the movie.
No, 100%, 100. And it's even funnier when you think about the levels of incompetency of these people that the movie wants to point out. And I think a couple things are important, right? Especially, it's so funny we're just talking about Seth as like he's the main character when he's so not. But if you think about what this movie is trying to say, you have all these people with all this money or taking care of all this money and all these high assets, right? And the level of incompetency in each one of them differs, right? But having Seth continuously mention how much or asking how much everyone makes, and you have like 1 or 2 million a year, and then you have like 50 million, and you have like 200 million. And it seems like the higher the salary, the less the person actually knows what the fuck is going on.
Well, I mean, it's 86 million, and Jeremy Irons explains, he's like, well, why I make the big bucks is because I can tell you what the music's going to do a day, a month, a year from now. And that line of like, and I don't hear a fucking thing. Like all I hear is silence.
Yeah.
It's just because, but it's also funny. That's like a great line. You're like, oh, damn. But then you realize like, oh no, he's been told for a year by his people that this is happening. So he's not actually that brilliant.
Well, he even said
But
it
also,
should have been dealt with weeks ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's
weeks ago, a year ago,
under the bridge.
Spilled milk under the bridge.
But I think his point is like, I don't deal with any of this crap. Like, you all give me information, and then I make a decision on what's going to happen, or I help Simon Baker make a decision, and you all hid this from me, which becomes pretty clear when everyone's whispering to one another if Jeremy Irons isn't in the room.
Yeah. Even the line at the end where this whole Seth asking everyone's salary thing comes to a close is when he goes, how much do you think, I forget Jeremy Irons' character's name. He's like, how much do you think he makes or he's worth? He's like, billions. He's like, well, not anymore.
Yeah. So one of my favorite scenes is the $2.5 million breakdown of Paul Bettany's salary and where it all went. And he's like, and that's $76,520 on hookers, booze, and dancers, mostly hookers. And he makes the line about how he could claim that as entertainment. And I was like, I don't know, did you get receipts for the hookers? I feel like that's a cash thing. Like an audit might be a little problematic from that percentage, for that scenario. So next we get Jeremy Irons coming in. I think the boardroom scene with him is probably like the best scene in the movie. It's the only scene that really explains what's going on in this, as we said before. And then you have Zachary Quinto, who sort of starts out very kind of scared. He's looking over at Demi Moore and Simon Baker, and then Jeremy Irons is like, "Look at me, you're talking to me." And then as he goes on, Zachary Quinto like gets more and more bold, and then at the one point he's like, "So what you're telling me is the music's about to stop?" And he's like, "No, using your analogy, the music's just slowing down. If it were to stop, as you say, it would be considerably worse." And then we get the line, "I don't hear, as we stand here tonight, I don't hear anything at all, or I just hear silence." Like, he didn't win, but he is trying to go toe to toe with Jeremy Irons in that scene. But Jeremy Irons just like fucking kills it.
You know what's funny too is how Jeremy Irons almost like becomes a bully and strong arms Kevin Spacey into like trying to go with him on selling. Kevin Spacey's withholding it, and he corners him in the bathroom, which is such like a middle school bully thing. I don't know. I just found it kind of funny how it like all in all, when you like strip them of their like billionaire millionaire status, like they're just people. Like they're trying to find a way to survive.
Well, and it shows you how desperate that character is, right? He's making $86 million a year, being a billionaire. He doesn't do shit like that. He doesn't beg Demi Moore to like, "Hey, please go quietly." He doesn't go into a bathroom and begs Kevin Spacey and then come back with a big fucking number written on a piece of paper. He doesn't do all this, but it's like how dire the situation is.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't.
Like back,
He showed up at the office at 4 a.m.
yeah,
and he apologized. Like, I apologize for dragging you all here at such an uncommon hour.
I like how well everyone's dressed too. Like no one was sloppy at all. Everyone's like, the best suit I have. There's also the thing
Especially
from Jeremy.
Simon Baker's suit. Dude, I would love that suit.
Yeah, I mean they all. So I think you're saying Simon Baker's suit because he's wearing it.
Yeah, Simon Baker is very attractive. I feel like you put a suit on him, and it's probably a winning suit.
That man was built for a suit.
Ah,
So
that's true.
Jeremy Irons' line about "be first, be smarter, or cheat," and I don't cheat, and then like it's a hell of a lot easier to be first. And then he's like, so this part it's like such a small thing, but it's perfect. Simon Baker says, "Sell it all," and Jeremy Irons holds up a finger and then pauses, thinks, and he goes, "Sam, is that even possible?" And then fucking Spacey's like, "All right, now let me show you what I do." And he's like, "Yeah, but at what cost?" And then goes through the whole speech about how you would do it. But then he's like, "You'll never sell another thing to anybody."
Yeah.
And then this is it. And he's like, "And who are you going to sell this to? We're selling at the current market price." It's so fucking good. And then the scene right after this with just the two, and he's like, "Most of us won't make it out of this one." He's talking about Wall Street. And he's like, "You're knowingly putting people out." I mean, all of that is fucking, just go watch the movie. I don't need to repeat the lines for you. Those two, when they speak in this movie, it's just fucking good.
Well, and then I 100% agree with everything you just said. But I also like that you always then get a watered down version of it from Paul Bettany explaining to the kids what's going on. And even saying, like, they'll find a way. Like, it's impossible, but they'll find a way. These people do not lose money.
Yeah. I think that, we've been going on for a while, so I want to skip ahead a little bit. The Moore and Baker on the elevator, she's like, "Don't fuck me on this." And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to fuck you on this," without saying it. But Jeremy Irons goes to Demi Moore, and he's like, "I have to give a head to the traitors." And she's like, "Is it me or Jared?" And he's like, "Come on. It's you. And then she's like, I tried to warn you about this. She's like, I don't think this is the strategy that you want to take right now. And then she argues again, and he's like, she argues again, and then like in his best Scar impersonation, is like, I really need you to be with me on this. Like, I just need you to stop fucking art. It's 4:30 in the morning. I need to stop. And then she's just like, I guess I'm gonna get like a shit ton of money. So yeah, I guess I'll do it.
Oh, that's another thing I want to say. It's kind of insane when who is it? It's Kevin. No, it's not Kevin Spacey. It's Stanley Tucci, I think. It doesn't matter. It's one of them who goes, I'll take the deal because I really need the money. And I don't know how to tell it. All right, it's Kevin Spacey. It's like, I really need the money. And it's insane how people who make millions of dollars a year find themselves to be broke by the end of their career. He works like 34, 35 years in the business, making presumably, millions of dollars a year, and he needs the money, which is insane.
He spent $1,000 a day to keep his dog alive.
Also, he's divorced, as we find out at the very end.
Yeah.
And, like, that's a commentary on divorce laws in America, I think.
Can I mention how brave that ex-wife is? She doesn't recognize her ex-husband out in the yard, and she goes outside.
It's a gated community.
To a man with a shovel. She goes outside to confront him.
Burying a body.
Burying a body. Yeah, exactly. It's like, are you insane? Also, there's shots of that woman in the nightgown. All right, anyways.
Okay,
So,
anyway.
Jump ahead to when they go get Stanley Tucci.
Well, yeah, and as they're doing that, Simon Baker comes down and talks to Bettany, and he's like, we need to know that you'll step up, in acute situations, what the right thing. And fucking Bettany basically just tells him to go fuck himself. And he's like, and I have faith in Sam, but just know we've always been aligned in what the right thing is, no matter how acute the situation is.
But then he zips off in his Aston Martin. It's like such good timing.
Well, and Simon Baker pulls this power move as Bettany's pulling out the money to tip the guy. Fucking Simon Baker just pulls out a lot more and hands it to the guy. He's like, I got your tip.
I didn't even notice that.
So they get to Tucci's, and this is another, like, the scene has nothing to do with Seth, but it shows you a lot. One, he doesn't even get out of the fucking car. And then when Tucci walks up, Stanley Tucci looks over at Seth, and Seth looks away from him.
Yeah, the guy the last thing he said to him was, "What's going to happen to us?" Like, he assumed he would never see him again.
Yeah, we forgot who he was when he's like, Eric handed me this. He's like, Eric who? Yeah, once you're gone, you're like, he took Kevin Spacey to heart. He's like, he's dead to me. I don't know who that is.
Him again. Yeah.
Once you walk out the threshold of this building, you're gone. So how I understand the turn of events happening is that he calls his house, his wife picks up, he gives him his number, he says, when he comes back, give him a call. Wife gives him a call, says he won't return your call. Yet when they're pulling up, he's just walking home.
I think he went out for a walk.
Yeah, probably to get coffee or something.
In the same suit that he wore?
It's been a long night, man.
For everyone else, I don't know what he's been doing, but yeah.
So, he's been thinking about how he just lost his livelihood. So, this is a really great scene. We got the bridge monologue where he goes over the math. And this is where you're like, all right, you're fucking like Mr. Numbers here.
Rain Man, yeah. And
it took me the fourth time watching this to be like, what is the point of this? And they sort of re-emphasize this with something Kevin Spacey says later. But when he's going over the bridge, he's like basically like coming to terms with, and everyone who gets fired is coming to terms with, like, this didn't fucking matter what I did, but he's like, I actually used to do something that mattered. I built this bridge that saved 1,500 years of time. When you also think about it, also probably saved lives, right? Like, every hour that you have people that are on the road less, you probably, like, lessen accidents and deaths. And he's like, I used to do something that fucking matters. And they go through this whole thing. He's like, dude, just come to the office. They'll pay you and they're going to fight you on everything. And then I love the line from Bettany afterwards. He's like, hey, some people like driving the long way home. Who the fuck knows? It's like Bettany learned nothing.
No, I disagree. I think that's Paul Bettany trying to tell him, like, come back, take the money. Like, don't be righteous about this. It's not worth
No,
it.
I get it. I get it. But I mean, after this, the Will and Seth are driving back to the office, and he's like, "You're gonna get fired." He's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Man, this is gonna affect people." He's like, "I know it's gonna affect me." And Seth's like, "No, real people." And he's like, "Dude, if you really want to do this, you have to know that you matter. What you do is important, and people are gonna be mad at you, but you have your hand on the scale. And if once you take it off, things get real fucking fair real quick." And he's like, "And nobody wants that."
Yeah, I think it's an excellent speech. Now, I'm not saying I agree with Paul Bettany. Like, I'm not an evil, cynical person, but I think it's an excellent description of how he justifies what they do, which is very different from the earlier car ride with Zachary Quinto and Penn Badgley, where he's like, "Does that seem right to you?" And Penn Badgley just says, "Right. What is right?" And then, like, looks off in the distance. But
I don't know if I said this line, but I'm just gonna say it again because I think it's so funny. But I think I did. But Penn Badgley, like, I don't really let those type of things bother me. And Zachary Quinto's like, "I've noticed that about you."
yeah. Well, or when he asks about the house, and he's like, "I hope he paid for it with cash." It's like, you can be a heartless little shit sometimes.
Yeah. So I'll skip over the scene that I said I didn't like to go to Seth crying in the bathroom. And one thing I'll say, because we already talked about this scene, but originally Simon Baker tells him.
You skipped, like, the best part of the car ride back.
What's that?
The when Paul Bettany says to Seth, like, he's like, "I'm gonna get fired." He's like, "Yeah, probably." And he's like, "Listen, nothing I can say right now will help. It's just gonna suck for a while, and then it'll all be okay." I think that is, like, the best life advice ever.
Breakups, firings, yeah. It's just good for all that.
I can't fix it. It's just gonna suck for a while, but eventually it'll be okay.
That is true. You're right. That is good life advice. But in the bathroom scene, apparently Simon Baker originally told him sorry after he's like, "You're gonna fire me, and this is all I ever want to do." And he says sorry. I love that they cut it because it just shows, like, Simon Baker does not give a shit about your crying. He doesn't, like, no sympathy for you. He's like, "You're gonna fire me today." He's like, "Huh? Yeah, probably. Yeah, we are probably gonna fire you." Which is also funny because they now, as I said earlier, just your risk management department is completely gone. It's just Asif Manvi is the only person left. Apparently, he might have gotten fired too, but it's just him.
That's all they need now. Also, what's interesting is that, like, when Kevin Spacey is on the floor, everyone comes to work in the morning, and Kevin Spacey's giving that speech, the speech that he is so good at giving. And then two things happen that's kind of interesting. One, Simon Baker circles him like a fucking vulture.
He's like making sure he does what he's supposed to.
No, I know. And I know what he's doing. But the other thing is that the $1 million or the $1.5 million bonuses that they could get if they sell 93% of.
It's 2.7 million total.
Yeah, they're not selling 93%.
It's, well, the movie leads you to believe that they did, because right, they're like, at the end they're like, we did it.
Nah, did they though? Because in the beginning, Paul Bettany had a hard time selling stuff at 96% on the dollar, and then at the end of it, he was having a hell of a hard time doing it for 64.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
so does that mean that he has to sell all his assets at 93, or
if it's $375 million, the paying price they paid was 65% of that. So whatever that math equals out to.
No, that's not 93.
No.
Wait, I'm talking about the 65% at the end. Yes, they pay 93 cents for every dollar it's worth.
But David, why do you think that they succeeded? Because I think he just says you all did, like, great work today, yada yada. I don't think they're all getting.
He said something of, like, you did it. Like, I don't know. To me, it made it sound like they hit the numbers. That would suck if you hit your numbers and you're like, all right, we just got to, if everyone else fucking does this, I'll get an extra whatever. I mean, honestly, though, you probably want everyone to hit 92 and save. Well, although, I don't know. It's a lot of fucking money in mortgages. I think the math works out to where they probably want people to make all the sales they can. I want to go back to Spacey's monologue because it's it's one of the best monologues in the movie. His hand motions are kind of perfect. He does this one thing where he's like, and no swaps, it's outgoing only today. Like the way he fucking hits it, it's just like fucking masterclass. He's a bad guy, I get it. Um and then I think the movie does a brilliant thing where the least important part of this is the actual trades. So it's just 30 seconds to a minute of Paul Bettany voiceover, like 93, fuck you, 65. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just like the numbers getting worse and worse as the day goes
As
on.
just like generic like stock footage B-roll of
Yeah.
people in offices go around. Yeah, that's fun.
So then Simon Baker comes in. He's like, "Good job. We're sending people home." He's like, "You're sending people home right now?" And he's like, "Yeah, no loose ends. Like it's the fucking mafia. Like we're just murdering these people." Uh, and then Simon Baker says, "You're still good. I guess someone upstairs likes you," which is like Simon Baker saying, "Like I would have fucking fired you."
He would have. He's a killer.
Yeah, he's like, "I'm firing
The
everybody."
kid's a
You know what's
fucking
funny?
killer.
Is that I guess someone upstairs likes you usually means like someone in the higher ups like you, but Jeremy Irons is literally upstairs eating, and so he goes up there to confront him about it, and he's like, "Let me out of here." I love Jeremy Irons, how ruthless he is, because you're kind of wondering who's the most ruthless in all of this, right? Jeremy Irons is like, "No, I'm gonna," and he can't quit because he'll lose all his pension and or his packages and everything like that. So he's begging to get fired. Jeremy Irons is like, "No, I'm gonna keep you on for." He doesn't say 2 years. I don't know why this bothers me. He doesn't say I'm gonna keep you on for 2 years. He says I'm gonna keep you on for another 24 months. Um, and then as he's doing this, Zachary Quinto walks in, and I just think how just what a fucking slap in the face.
He gets really pissed about it, and I don't really know why. Maybe because he's like, "Well, you're the one with integrity, so like the fact that you're taking a promotion. Like, I don't have belief in anything." But I don't know. Like, as you just said, like, I'll stick around for 2 years because I need the money. You shouldn't really be getting mad at Quinto over there for taking the bag as well. Um, One thing that's pretty great about this too is like at the end, Jeremy Irons is eating and he's like, I'm starting to feel better about all this. And then he's like, we're going to keep the kid. He's like, he's getting promoted. There's going to be a lot of money to be made coming out of this. And I think The Big Short maybe did a little better job about this when you have the lines from because we're never going to get to do The Big Short because we've seen it unfortunately, but unless it's December, you have the lines from Steve Carell when he's like, they're getting bailed out. They didn't fucking learn anything. They knew that they would get bailed out, so they like didn't have to learn any fucking lesson. And that's kind of like what Jeremy Irons is sort of saying. Like everything's gonna be fine because this is how the world works. They're gonna figure out a way to keep things rolling. So it's like we did this. We're gonna be fine on this, and then we're gonna make money coming out of this. Like there's everything's gonna go so fucking low that we can start making money after this is over. Yeah, I don't know. The movie's just kind of great, and that bit too,
Well,
just like letting you know
I don't know if we.
they're all piece of shit.
Yeah, I don't know if we skipped the scene, but has it already happened that Demi Moore, Stanley Tucci, like this their second interaction, where like she's super distraught and Stanley Tucci's trying to make her feel better, which is like the exact
That's so
opposite
funny.
of the first one. And then did you do the math to see how much he got paid?
I read it. Someone was like, I thought it was 1.4,
No, it's
which made
1.5.
sense. But then someone said, yeah, it's an 8.5 hour day at 1.5
Yeah.
million because that would be an even number.
Yeah.
I was like, I guess that makes sense.
That's pretty sweet. I would sit in a chair for 8.5 hours for $1.5 million.
Yeah, like as moral as you can be, it's like, all right, I got a family. Like,
I
I'm not doing
I got 3 kids.
Yeah, I was the risk management guy. I wasn't like,
I raised the red flags. I can feel good about myself.
I hopefully since that security guard was so bad at his job, Stanley Tucci saved a bunch of emails, like some CYA, like I warned people about this, like I'm not going to jail.
Well, didn't The Big Short also say like no one went to jail for this?
Oh, there's one guy.
One guy.
One sad sack.
Was his name Eric Dale?
It was not. I don't know. That's a real person. And then we have the dig in the grave thing, which we talked about.
So, David, what is the symbology of
Symbolism. I did listen to that episode.
It's the last little bit of his, like, the goodness in him has died. You know, he did this thing that he knew he was wrong, and he's not even man enough to quit in the end. He's going to take the 24 months of money and his options and all that. It's the last little bit of goodness was that dog, and it's dead, and he's burying it along with his integrity.
Cool. Yeah, I like it. Picasso.
I came up with that right now. I had nothing. I didn't even know what the whole bridge thing was about. So I did some of the alternate casting earlier, but I left this one. Jeremy Irons was originally offered to Ben Kingsley, Billy Crudup, and Tim Robbins. I like Billy Crudup in that. I think that would have actually been really fucking great. Spotlight Billy Crudup.
Trying to remember who Billy Crudup is.
He's the beautiful attorney in Spotlight. He is Almost Famous. He's Dr. Manhattan.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
he's also in The Morning Show, which I can't shake from my head, that character.
Tim Robbins is way too tall for this character.
He's married to Naomi Watts?
Is he?
Yeah, he is.
Good for both.
Good for him. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that Jeremy Irons like hit the nail on the head. I don't know that he could have been replaced.
There's also something about him being foreign, right? There's something about him being like British and like, oh, he's not from here. But there's just something about like a foreign entity who owns an American corporation. It's just something like it adds to it for me.
I think it was pretty well cast with the Demi Moore exception that we talked about earlier. I think Carla Gugino would have been excellent in that role. I also think that Jodie Foster could have done it because I know this podcast loves Jodie Foster.
I just watched Naiad. Did you watch Naiad yet?
No, but I it's on my list.
I saw the fourth season of True Detective with her.
Night Country.
Night Country. It was pretty okay.
So okay. I took a break because when you said she was married to Billy Crudup, I was like, I thought she was with Liev Schreiber, but they apparently never got married and they are separated, and now she's with Billy Crudup. So
as of last year.
Well, yeah. I mean, she's just like two handsome devils in a row, so good for her. Well, yeah, I love this movie.
It's better than
it's
Big
a talkie.
Short.
It's a I don't know. That was just a hot take. They're both pretty fucking good. This is just like, as I said, I watched this 4 times in the last like 6 days, and honestly, I could watch it again now. There's like nothing, you know what I mean? Although it's off Tubi. Thanks a lot, guys. But this is like, just if you like these type of movies, it's just exceptional.
I think if you have 2 hours to kill, this is like the greatest way to do that. Like if you're on an airplane or bored, it's just, I don't know. It's very succinct.
A lot of good voices too. Like Spacey's, got a great voice. Irons, Quinto, even
Simon Baker.
He does actually.
Simon Baker has a great voice. Yeah,
he does.
He has great voice. He has great suits. He has a great look. He has a great
Probably
no wonder Gharrett hates him. I understand it now.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
I'm Gharrett.
And this is Alon. And I finally watched Margin Call.